guys, it's Anissa. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, you're gonna need a notepad, let me tell you. Like, we are about to get some education up in here. I'm going to be sharing with you guys makeup tips and tricks that I wish I would have learned a million years ago and have just completely changed the way and the technique and the look of how I do my makeup. If you guys have watched my videos before, 80% of these you guys have heard, but some of them I actually use off camera and don't talk about like I should. If you guys are interested to hear some makeup tips and hacks, then make sure to keep on watching. But before you go any further, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. I post on this channel every 4 days, so you never have to miss me for too long. But yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. All right, first things first, before I start my makeup, I always make sure to have a pack of makeup wipes. I use these throughout my makeup. If I ever use my fingers to apply eyeshadow, then I can wipe my fingers off using that. Catch fallout when I'm applying my foundation with my fingers, wipe my space down in case anything spills. They're more handy to have than to not have. I always do my lip balm first, that way by the time I do my lips, which is my last step, the lip balm has been able to like soak in and moisturize my lips, because I found that when I try to put lip balm on like right on top of it, it doesn't always mix very well with pencil liners. It's very hard to get pigmentation out of them because this is so thick. e.l.f. Ride or Die lip balm, and this is in the scent Mighty Mint. This is a really good dupe for the glossierlipbalm.com. When I do forget to do this, I get so mad, because also when you put it on at the beginning, especially if you're wearing like a matte lipstick, it helps to not make your lipstick look like really chappy and stuff. Try doing your eyebrows and your eyeshadow first. I have a couple reasons that I prefer to do my eyebrows and my eyeshadow first. Number one, with eyeshadow, you don't have to worry about fallout or anything like that, because I know that I have a lot of eyeshadow palettes that I love that have a lot of fallout. And when I was doing my face first, I tended not to use them because, you know, you have this like perfect base that's all done, and then you get colorful eyeshadow, especially glitter is very hard to get off. If you're trying to just sweep it off with a brush, it's not gonna happen. You need a wipe to wipe it off. I feel like when I was doing my eyebrows after my face, when I would spoolie them out, it would almost take the foundation off from right around my eyebrows, so then my eyebrows looked unnaturally light. Now that I do them before, I don't have to worry about that. And also, it gives me the opportunity to carve them out. Now, I guess you could carve them out afterwards anyways, but when I did my face first, I set my face with powder and then did my eyebrows. You don't want to put cream on top of a powder if you've already set it. The eyebrow portion is kind of going to be like more of a tutorial. If you have black hair like me, please do not use a black eyebrow pencil. Please, please, please. That is like the #1 best way to get unnatural looking eyebrows. It just makes them look too dark. Go for something that's like a black brown or an espresso or a really dark brown. It helps them to look a little bit more natural. So first, I always just spoolie them out, and I spoolie them into the general shape that I want them to be, because when I fill in my eyebrows, I kind of just follow an outline. I really focus more on outlining them than anything. I do not really fill in the front part of my brow, because I feel like when I do, it makes it look a lot less natural. Wherever my hair grows up straight, I really don't mess with. However, when I'm outlining the bottom, I will start right here, and then when I'm outlining the top, I start right here, because I found that it makes it look a little bit more natural. Now, you don't want to not completely touch the front of your eyebrow at all, because then it's not going to look ombre. It's just going to look like, oh, this wasn't filled in and then everything else was. Outlining it on the bottom kind of gives the illusion that it's filled in on the top and the bottom, but it's really not. I always start with outlining the bottom. It helps me personally visualize what I want it to look like better than when I start on the top. Every time I try to start on the top, my brain just can't function that way. And I just follow the shape. Really, the only thing I do on the top is accentuate my arch. My hair goes straight. Where that ends, that's where I start. And then I spoolie them out. Obviously, that way the product doesn't look super harsh. I like to outline with a pencil and fill in with a pomade. Today for pomade, I'm gonna be using this e.l.f. Lock On Liner brow cream. This is in the color Espresso. This stuff is very, very creamy and pigmented. You do not need a lot at all. I like to keep some of the areas sparse. It keeps it looking more hair-like, and it makes it look a little bit more natural. Fill in the bottom half, really, because the top half of my eyebrow is pretty filled in. And then brushing it out. And that is what my brow looks like. I like to keep them very natural looking, but I do like them to look carved out. I'm just gonna do the same thing on this one. Now that I filled them in, I wanna carve them out, but before I carve them out, I also wanted to mention, if you're somebody with more like thicker, fluffier brows, you can probably get away with using a pencil that is a little bit more bigger. I love this Benefit Precisely My Brow. The pencil on it is super tiny. So if you're somebody like me who has thinner brows, then I would recommend using this. Next, we're going to carve out only the bottom. The reason I only carve out the bottom is because I like to carve out the top with the foundation that I'm using. Kind of the same reason as why I do my eyebrows first to begin with. When I was doing my face first, when I was spooling through, my eyebrows were looking unnaturally light because I was spooling the product off from around the brows. I like to use a lighter concealer underneath to still give me that highlighted look and also make them really clean. I like to use a pot concealer or a foundation stick. They are a lot thicker than something that like is gonna be a concealer that comes in a tube. The reason I wanna use something thicker is because we are dealing with hair. So you want something that can not only conceal, but will also lay down those hairs that you're trying to conceal. My favorite is the Nars Soft Matte Complete Concealer. This is in the color Medium Dark 2 Caramel. When you're carving out your brows, do not use the same brush on the top as you use on the bottom, because the whole point in using a different shade on the top is to make it match everything else. Now you have this concealer on here that's lighter, so if you mix that with the foundation, it's not gonna be the same shade as your foundation. And if I ever get a little bit of product in the brow, all I do is go back over it with whatever I was using. For now, we are done with the brows. Moving on to eyeshadow. Use some type of eyeshadow primer base. When I did my face before my eyeshadow, what I would do is make sure that I had foundation and concealer on my eyelids, because obviously you want everything to be even, and then I would just use that as my eyeshadow primer. So I was using eyeshadow primer before I knew I was. The one thing I do not recommend, and this is just from my personal experience, do not set your eyeshadow primer. Guys, the whole reason you use an eyeshadow primer, number one, is to give yourself a even canvas, and or number two, to give yourself a tacky base. That way your eyeshadow has something to stick to. Now this is not only gonna make your eyeshadows more pigmented, but it's also going to make them more long lasting. If you were to put your eyeshadow on with no primer or anything like that, it's most likely not going to last as long, and it's not gonna have as much pigmentation because it has nothing to hang on to except for your skin. Whether you're using an actual eyeshadow primer or a concealer or a foundation, just use something, and I would recommend not setting it. Now, it is gonna be a little bit harder to blend your colors because it's going to stick to your eye, but I would rather have that problem than have my eyeshadow looking completely different at the end of the day than it did at the beginning. This tip is really more for people of color, but it also could work for people who are lighter. I like to use an eyeshadow primer that is a little bit lighter than me because it helps my shadows to pop a little bit more. For today, I'm gonna be using this JUVIA'S Place I Prep Eye Prime Eye Primer, and this is in the shade number 2. Now we have an even canvas on our eyes to work with. If you have very veiny eyes, giving yourself an even canvas is gonna make your eyeshadow's job 10 times easier. Today we're going to be using this Ace Beauty Scarlet Dusk palette, and this is what it looks like. I figured we'd do like a little pink moment. I'm just feeling pretty in pink today. I actually already filmed this whole video once and I wasn't recording at all. So I've gotten to practice the look that I did. It's not really gonna be so much about the look, but more so the tips that I do in the look. And the biggest tip I can give you guys, especially when you're trying to blend out your colors, hold your brush at the very end. Because when you hold your brush like this, it gives you so much control. It's really hard to make sure that there's not harsh lines because you're so close that it's hard to make everything look like it's effortlessly blended, versus if you're out here, you can take your color and sweep it, and then it looks really airbrushed. I prefer to start with a little bit of color and then work my way up to a lot of color. I know some people prefer to pack on all their color at first and then blend it out. There's nothing wrong with that, but in some situations, it's a lot harder to take away than to put more on. It kind of makes sense. Like when you're doing more fine motor skills or like detail work, you want to be up close. That way you have a lot of control and everything is really precise. Versus with like when you're blending, you don't want any harsh lines. Nobody wants a harsh line in their eyeshadow. I always like to put a darker color out here because what it's gonna do is add dimension to your eyes. So if you look at your eye, there's kind of a low peak, high peak, low peak. Just like in your face, how there's contours and dips and curves. You want to use those natural dips in your face and let them work with you. So in those more shallow points, even when you're doing a halo eye, it looks so pretty because these are the low points and you want those to be dark. And then once you put a shimmer on the high point, it naturally works for itself. Now this is a little bit different. See how I'm packing on my color? Especially when you're trying to create some dimension, it doesn't matter if it's really dark looking because it's easy to blend. Using setting spray or your finger with shimmers is going to give you so much more pigment and make the color so much prettier than if you were to just use it the way it is. Now, don't get me wrong, I've tried plenty of eyeshadows that look beautiful on their own, but if you can do something to make it look better, like, why wouldn't you? On this side, I'm gonna do no setting spray, and then on this side, I am going to do setting spray just for demonstrational purposes. I'm not gonna use my finger. Setting spray, no setting spray. This eye took me about 2 seconds to apply the shadow, and over here I had to work a lot harder to get even a little bit of pigment. Don't get me wrong, this is still pretty. I try to give you guys reasons for the tips that I do. Sometimes I don't have a reason, it just works because it works, but sometimes there is a science behind it. Whenever you're using a liquid eyeshadow or a cream-based eyeshadow that comes in a pot, it's really creamy and pigmented and easy to apply, because it goes on smoother. You don't have to fight to put it on. Versus with like the powder formula, it's a little bit harder to put on. There's no wetness there to help anything really stick. Probably honestly last a little bit longer this way too. I am going to just quickly finish my eyeshadow and then we will move on to eyeliner. Now for eyeliner, if you are somebody that just cannot do eyeliner, no matter what you do, no matter how many times you try, it just doesn't come out right, or it's crooked, or it's not as pointy as you want it to, or the shape isn't what you like, you need these in your life. These are the e.l.f. Line and Define eye tapes. Personally, I have always struggled with eyeliner because it is very hard for me to do like fine motor skills without shaking. I shake when I write, I shake when I'm using tweezers, anything that uses tiny muscles in your hands for small movement, it's very hard for me to do. So this has been a lifesaver. I used to put these on before I did my eyeshadow, but the reason that I don't is because I feel like I have a little bit more freedom to go out more and really diffuse the outside of my eyeshadow. That way we don't have any harsh lines. It doesn't matter, you can use these before or after. There's no set way to use them, but I'm just telling you that's why I use them the way I do. I used to use them before my eyeshadow because I didn't like my eyeshadow going past my eyeliner, but now all I do is take the rest off with makeup wipe. The shape that I like my eyeliner to go in, I don't like it super up, I don't like it super down, because depending on the angle that you do, it can affect the way that your eyes look. It can make them look more elongated, it can make them look more open, smaller, bigger. I like to just follow the natural curve that is right underneath here on my eye, and that is like my perfect shape. So this is all preference, but this is what I personally like. Some people like their eyeliner thicker, some people like it thinner, some people like a more curved wing, some people like a more straight wing. I kind of like something in between curved and straight. With these, it's very important to make sure that you have the same angle on both eyes, because if not, one's gonna be up here and one's gonna be down here. So if these are evenly cut, if they're the same length, all you have to do is you can tell visually from how far away it is from your eyebrow. My eyes are not only hooded, but I also have a lot of extra skin on my eyes, as you guys can see. So when I do my eyeliner, you'll be able to see it right now on these creases, but when I look down or when I look up, there's an empty space because that skin is tucked away. So that's also something that I've always struggled with. I have been loving this HAUS Laboratories. It's Lady Gaga's line, the Matter Than Matte liquid eyeliner, and this is in the color Punk, which is just a really nice dark black. I always start with my wing first because I think it's easier to visualize what you want your eyes to look like that way. I really don't do a whole lot of liner on my actual lid because if it looks too thick, I think it looks really unflattering. And I really only do my eyeliner to like the inside of the color part of my eye. I don't drag it all the way down. It'll make sense when I show you guys. I start on the outside and I actually start drawing on the tape. That way you have a really nice crisp pointy line instead of trying to follow inside the lines. I always start shorter and make them longer. It's way easier for me to add more than to take away, especially when you have eyeshadow on, because if you have to take away, you're taking your eyeshadow off and then you have to try to make both eyes look even again and it's just a mess. And I also kind of pull that way, kind of gets rid of some of the lines in there. You see what I'm talking about? Like there's little gaps and stuff. Fill those in. I have the wing that I want. I'm just gonna do the same thing over here. Okay, they look to be about even. This one may be a little bit longer, but it's okay. They don't have to be perfect. Do not rip these off as soon as you're done. If you do, you're not giving your eyeliner any time to dry, so it's just gonna bleed, and then you're not gonna have that crisp line, which means there was no point even putting these on. I recommend these over tape. They're not real super plasticky. They're a little bit more skin friendly. They kind of have like a cloth material to them, and they also catch more fallout than what plastic would, because plastic has no give. There's nothing there to catch any product, and these actually do a really good job of catching product. And you have a perfect wing. I know some people use these just to start to learn how to do their eyeliner. but I'll probably always use them. For now, we are done with the eyes, so we're gonna go ahead and move on to complexion. Using my handy dandy makeup wipe to just wipe off any excess. If I have any eyeshadow that is on this side of my wing, I'll go ahead and remove that. I usually have to do my wings pretty long because my eyelash extensions are pretty long. So like you see, this one out here is just about as long as my wing is. Now we are ready for complexion. First, priming. If you're not using primer, you need to be. It's something that is going to help not only make your makeup last, but it also gets your skin ready for makeup and your makeup ready for makeup. If you're not giving your makeup anything to stick to besides your skin, you're not gonna be happy with what's happening. I'm sorry, but I've never met anybody with perfect skin. We all have a concern that we would like to address, and I feel like primer is like the perfect step to do that. No matter what skin type you are, I would so recommend trying using a hydrating primer in conjunction with another primer. I'm telling you, I used to never use hydrating primers. I use a hydrating primer even if I've done my skincare, because what this is going to do, it's going to give your makeup something really smooth to go onto, and it's gonna give your primer something to go onto. Say you have really big pores and you want to pore filling primer. Using a like hydrating primer gets your skin ready to fill in those pores and go on smoothly. A problem targeting primer, it makes its job easier. I stay away from hydrating primers that have oil in them. That is something I don't like. I don't like primer oils because I feel like that is not for my skin. But hydrating primer that's like a lotion texture, I could do, especially since I do have oily skin. The reason I started doing this also is because in the winter of last year, my skin got very, very, very dry, and I was not liking the way that my makeup was looking because I wasn't using anything hydrating other than my skincare. Today we're gonna be using this BOBBI Brown. This is the Vitamin Enriched Face Base. I absolutely love this stuff. It's like an extra skincare booster type of step. And I don't put a lot on, just a little bit, just to get your skin ready. I was so scared to use hydrating primers because I was like, oh no, my skin is already oily enough. I do not need any extra added hydration. But there's a difference between being hydrated and being oily. And that's what I had to figure out. My two biggest concerns with my skin are my pores and being matte. Love this Haley's Beauty Refined Prime Foundation Primer. This is amazing for filling in your pores, but it also does a really good job at mattifying. I personally have found that silicone-based primers do a really good job at filling in your pores. Now, if you're somebody that doesn't like silicone-based primers, but you do have a pore problem, then try the e.l.f. putty primers. Those are really good and they're not silicone-based. I am actually really making sure that the product is worked in to the places on my face that have the biggest pores. For me, that's really like right here by my cheeks, my forehead, and my chin. And then I go ahead and apply it everywhere else. But I really like to make sure that the product is worked into my problem areas. And you guys will see from my forehead, this does a really good job at mattifying. And that's honestly what I found with most pore filling primers. They usually tend to do a really good job at mattifying too. And this just makes the skin feel so smooth. This is online only. I haven't found any store that sells this. The Nyx Pore Filler is also very, very similar to this. I go ahead and put the product everywhere else. This is for specifically my oily people, setting your primer. What I'll do is if I test out a loose powder and it has flashback, I'll use it for this step. That way I don't have to get rid of it. This is the AIRSPUN Original Loose Face Powder. I used to love this stuff, but it has really bad flashback, especially for darker people. You don't want to use a lot because it's going to make your face cakey if you use too much. So what I like to do is I just like to go in with a powder brush, go in circular motions, because what you're doing is allowing it to work into the skin, but doing the circular motion is going to help sweep off any extra product that you don't need. Because if you have more than what you need, it's gonna look cakey. It gives your oil another barrier to go through before it disturbs your makeup. Also, it does a good job at filling in your pores and mattifying. So it's like a second primer. What you do before you put on your actual makeup is just as important as what you're doing when you're putting your makeup on. If you don't have like good prep, you can't expect your makeup to look the absolute best that it can look, because it's not going to. To make sure I don't have any extra powder on, just taking like a really big powder brush all over and knocking it all off. I'm gonna be using this JUVIA'S Place I Am Magic Foundation, and this is in the color 410 Nairobi. I heard that they are discontinuing this, which if they do, literally like the worst mistake you could ever make. This is the most full coverage foundation I've ever tried in my life. Has a beautiful finish. The only thing I don't like about it is that it's thick, but I have a hack for that. If you're using a stick foundation or a foundation that is more thicker in consistency, spraying your sponge with setting spray is going to help make it so much creamier and easier to blend into the skin. Or you can just use a brush. I found that thicker foundations do a little bit better with a brush. If you want the most coverage that you can get out of a foundation, use your brush. I think a sponge looks a little bit more skin-like, and I think it soaks into the skin a little bit better that way. Don't get me wrong, I still will use a foundation brush. Just depends on the day, but I honestly like using a sponge because I get it wet anyways. I use a sponge in pretty much every part of my makeup after this point. A sponge is an essential for me. It makes everything look very skin-like and blend together. You know, you don't want all of your makeup to look like different pieces. Like, you can point out like, okay, here's your bronzer, here's your blush. No, you want everything to look seamless. I actually think that this shade is too light for me, especially with high-end foundations. I 100% recommend doing this. If you have a high-end foundation, drugstore foundation that you love to pieces, there's no need for you to buy a summer shade and a winter shade. All you have to do is go ahead and buy these NYX Total Control Pro Hue Shifters. They come in dark, which is this. They come in light, it comes in warm, and it comes in cool. Basically, what these allow you to do is create your perfect shade without having to break the bank and buy two $50 foundations. Sometimes if a line doesn't have a shade that is yours, you can get something that you think you can make work and go ahead and do a little bit of mixing. Also, when it comes to foundation, I have found if you use foundation and powder foundation, like me, less is more. If every little spot is not covered by the time your foundation is on your face, I actually probably could mix because this is lighter, but it's fine. It's okay, because when you use your powder foundation, it's your insurance policy. You're gonna be fine. Now, if you're using a translucent powder, you probably wanna make sure that everything is covered that you wanna be covered, but don't use more product than you need to. In general, in any step, there's more chance for cakiness. Spray my brush, my sponge, and see how creamy it makes it. Now, usually with this foundation, I would have to use a brush because it's too thick for a sponge. And another tip, if you're having a hard time getting your perfect shade, if your foundation is too light, like this one is, use powder foundation on top of it that's a little bit darker. And between the too light and the dark, you should get a pretty good shade. For this step, I used the NYX Bear With Me Multitasking Spray. The funny thing is, you know, even if I do use a brush for my foundation, I always go over it with a sponge because it just makes it look more skin-like. Doesn't make it look like it's sitting on top of your skin. It makes it look like it actually is your skin. Next is concealer. e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer. And this is in the color Deep Olive. I love this stuff. All I do is like pretty much half of a triangle is disperse it. For this next tip, you wanna make sure that you check the finish of your concealer before you try this. If your concealer is a like satin finish / natural finish, what you can do is let it sit for like a minute or two. And what that's gonna do is kind of let it almost dry and thicken up, and it's gonna give your concealer more coverage. Now, if your concealer is matte, which I've made this mistake before, do not do that because it will dry and then you will be left with this underneath your eyes. It's not gonna move. Also, let's use the sponge underneath the eyes because with creams, I found that this is just like the best tool because it makes everything look just so skin-like. Again, I will still use a brush underneath my eye every once in a while. It's also a lot easier to disperse the product with the sponge. I'm gonna eat my words for 2 seconds about a sponge because although I love my sponge, there's some things in some places, especially like right underneath the eye, that a sponge cannot reach. The e.l.f. Flawless Concealer Brush, and what I do is I get right up in that crease in my eye and make sure that everything's blended out because I have a lot of little fine lines underneath my eyes, and the last thing that you want to do is have your concealer hanging onto those fine lines because what it's gonna do is once you set it, it's gonna look even worse. If anything is ever weird going on underneath your eyes, do not assume that setting it is gonna make it look better because sometimes it will, but sometimes it'll just make it look worse. And one place that you don't want on your face to look cakey is underneath your eyes because that's the center of your face. You want that to look really seamless and smooth. And I learned this tip from Juicy Jazz. I like to use a lighter powder underneath my eyes just to keep that brightening effect. I think it's kind of pointless to use a brightening concealer and then go in with something that's the same shade as your skin. A lot more brightening powders on the market than there used to be. I really like the Laura Mercier, the newest shade that they just came out with. I have a video on that one. But today I'm going to be using the JUNO & Co. And this is the makeup setting powder in the color Brighten. I prefer to use a sponge for this step, especially because you want your powder and your cream to mesh together. I feel like when I use a brush, it kind of just sits on top of the skin and doesn't really get the opportunity to actually set your makeup. And see, it just melts into the skin. Now I'm going to do my cream bronzer and cream blush. Now the reason that I do my powder underneath my eyes before I do those is because I don't like to let my wet concealer sit for a really long time, because sometimes it can separate and do weird things no matter how good the formula is. It just happens sometimes. If it's a good powder, it really shouldn't interfere with anything too much. I like to go backwards. So I like to do bronzer, blush, then highlighter. I do bronzer first because I have the most difficulty with bronzer and making it look super natural. So I like to do it first. That way I can layer my blush on top of it and kind of conceal it a little bit. If you want more longevity and a more like pack to your punch with your bronzer and your blush, use a cream and a powder. The reason that I would say use a cream and a powder is because when you put that cream on, you're gonna have your pigment. Then when you put that powder on, you're gonna set it and it's gonna make it more long lasting and also have a little bit more pigment. Versus if you were to just use powder, it's gonna fade a lot quicker. So I like to use as many cream products as I can. And don't get me wrong, I love powder because I love to look nice and matte, but using cream is what your skin knows best. It looks more skin-like than what powder does. I'm gonna be using this Fenty Beauty Matchstick, and this is in the color Espresso. The best tip that I can get for you guys on this, because I'm still really not a pro at it, I already have like kind of a natural contour bronze to them. I honestly really don't know the difference between bronzing and contouring because it's not something I'm super big into. I start at this part of my ear right here before the hump, the top of my ear, and I just do a little bit right there. And then I do the same thing over here. Because if you put it too low, then it's not gonna make you look chiseled. I don't do powder and cream because I like my bronzer to look really, 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 really natural. I still haven't mastered it yet, so I'm kind of playing around with it. Just using my sponge. And my biggest problem with bronzer, because I tell you guys all the time, I don't act perfect because I'm not perfect. I always feel like I either blend it out too much or I don't blend it out enough because I don't want it to look super harsh. See, look, that ends up being the perfect placement. What I love too about if it looks too harsh, it's okay because I go in with powder foundation over top of it, so that kind of helps mellow it down also. I leave it like this for now. When you are doing your blush, try to have your blush match your lip color. 9 times out of 10, if you feel like your color palette is looking weird, it's because the tones on your cheeks and your lips are not the same. You don't want to have a super pink, cool toned blush with like a really warm brown nude color. It's not gonna look good. This is the Fenty Beauty Cheeks Out in the color 10 Rose Latte, and then my lip liner is really brown. So if your blush is more brown, make sure you're using a more brown lip combo. Now my lip liner is really brown, and then this is kind of more pinky, but they end up being really warm and brown because of how dark the lip liner is. Also, I like this too because this does work well over powder. Like if you were to do powder foundation in this and then this does work well. In most cases, you really don't want to put cream over powder, but sometimes you can. And in this case, that's one of those if you do have to, like say you forget or something like that. There's different ways that you can place your blush that will make your face look different. Some of it will lift, some of it will just kind of, if you want it more right here. I kind of like to put it more on my cheekbone because I really don't like to do like just the apples of my cheeks. Don't want it to look really obvious that there's blush on your face. You want it to like be like a natural blush, like your skin is blushing. Almost really like where my highlighter goes. And the higher up you bring it, the more it's gonna lift your face. Just going back in. This tip that I'm about to share with you guys is honestly probably my favorite. If you want the most coverage out of your powder foundation, you need to be using a powder puff. The difference is crazy. I'm not even gonna do half and half because it's so noticeable, but if you guys check out my last review where I did the review on the Beauty Creations, you can tell a clear difference from the brush side to the powder side. If you're using a puff, you wanna make sure that it matches you because it has so much coverage that you're gonna be able to tell if it doesn't match you. This is the Too Faced Born This Way multi-use complexion powder in the color Spiced Rum. And again, you can always use translucent powder. say I want to do like a really light makeup day, put concealer on underneath my eyes and then over any blemishes that I have. Guys, I think I'm okay because I didn't put my powder on all the way yet, but I forgot to carve out the top of my brow. I will tell you for this step, if you do carve out your brows the way I do, if your foundation is lighter than your face, do not use that on the top of your brow. Use a foundation that is close to your skin tone, because that's the whole reason that we waited to carve them out. And see how much more natural that bronzer looks, and the blush is still peeking through. Now it is time for blush. I've never heard anybody talk about this blush, and if you are darker like me, you need this in your life. Pure matte blush in the color Very Beautiful. Look at how gorgeous that is. You see how I have like a lot over here? I really don't worry about if it's like my placement isn't perfect or if it's too pigmented, because look, the sponge just fixed everything. Next is highlighter. I will share this tip with you guys, although I don't use it because I'm not somebody who likes a really super blinding highlight anymore. If you want your highlighter to be super, super blinding, go ahead and spray your brush with setting spray and then apply it. Makes the world of a difference. I showed you guys that hack somewhere on my channel. If I can think of the video, I'll link it up here. I use two different brushes for my highlighter. I use a more smaller brush like this, and then I use a more fan brush. I like to go in with the smaller brush and of course do the nose highlight, which is just everything and more on the tip of my nose. And then on my cheeks, I place this precisely where I want it, right here and right here. I like something that, you know, is pretty but not super blinding. Like I don't like two stripes on my cheeks anymore. I will take that big brush and blend it out. That way it is more natural. This is the Maybelline Master Chrome by Face Studio Metallic Highlighter in the color 200 Molten Topaz. This is a really good dupe for the topaz that Becca makes. We're gonna go ahead and finish the eyes first. So for eyes, I was going to use this brown pencil, but I forgot that I was doing a pink look. If you're doing something that is more nude, if you want your eyes to look smaller, then use a dark brown or a black. If you want your eyes to look more open, then use a white in your waterline. One thing I cannot live without is an inner corner highlight. It's using those curves in your face. Again, this is the most inner part and deepest part of your eye. Using those curves in your face to help the light want to hit those places naturally. What I like to do is use whatever colors I used in my crease or my outer crease on the bottom. I'm gonna use, I think this color will be pretty to use. If you're not doing anything on the bottom part of your eyes, you need to. It is still life-changing. Bottom mascara, if you mess up, let it dry and then go in with a cotton swab. Do not be impatient like me and think that you'll beat the odds and try to go in when it's wet, because it'll just smear and look worse. All right, and last is lips. I really struggle when it comes to lining my lips and getting it perfect. And the thing that has helped me the most is going like this and stretching your lips out. When your lips are like this, there's a lot of bumps and curves. Going like this straightens everything out and smooths everything out. And on the top of my lip, like whatever you call these high points, I go out to in. And you see how the brown in my lips is matching the cheeks. It just works, guys. Like I can't explain it to you, but you just have to trust that it works. Setting spray, use whatever you like. If you want your makeup to be more glowy, use a glowing setting spray. If you want it to be more matte, use a matte one. If you do not own one of these, you need one. It's a mini fan. And the reason I like to do this is because it helps the setting spray soak into your skin really quickly. What is going on? Do y'all see that? That's never done that. It was like splotchy when I sprayed it. All right, guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope I didn't leave anything out. If I did, I guess I'm just gonna have to do a part 2. Let me know if you guys used any of these tips already or if you plan on using them, or let me know what your favorite makeup tip is that you wish you would have learned a million years ago. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.